Gaming Bolt presents 15 ultimate video game boss combinations you won't be able to defeat no matter what you do. Boss battles are an important part of gaming culture. That importance may have started diminishing a little bit in the modern era of gaming, but even now, boss fights are a vital aspect of video games. Be it because of their incredible design, their role in the game's narrative, or the challenge they provide, the boss fights that really get things right cement themselves in our collective memories like few things can. But what if these terrifying enemies decided to join forces to take the player down? In this feature, we're going to take a look at 15 combinations of bosses from a variety of games and franchises that would prove to be absolutely devastating for anyone who would ever face them. Of course, no one ever really could face them, since this list, it goes without saying, is purely hypothetical. We've got a lot to discuss, so let's jump right in. Dark Eater Midir, Dark Souls 3 Ringed City, and Xenojiva, Monster Hunter World. Dark Eater Midir from Dark Souls 3 The Ringed City is a massive, terrifying, four-winged dragon with only one weak point in its entire body, the head, a veritable arsenal of attacks, and moves and strategies to counter almost anything you can throw its way. Monster Hunter World's Xenojiva, on the other hand, is a newborn elder dragon, so it's not that hard as far as boss encounters go, since there are various ways to defeat it, and telegraphing its attacks isn't always that hard. If you combine the two though, you're left with a fearsome beast with little to no weaknesses and every chance of blowing you all the way to high hell and back within seconds of seeing you. Senator Armstrong, Metal Gear Rising, and M. Bison, Street Fighter V. With regenerative powers, superhuman strength, and almost complete immunity to physical damage, Metal Gear Rising's Senator Armstrong is a pretty formidable foe to begin with. The final boss fight in the game wasn't a cakewalk by any means after all, but imagine him joining forces with Street Fighter's M. Bison, the man with not just super strength and mastery of the martial arts, but also telekinetic abilities and the power to teleport. It would be a positively deadly combination, if not almost unbeatable. XENOMORPH from Alien Isolation, and PRIMAGEN, TUROK 2. The XENOMORPH from the Alien franchise of films and games is a terrifying thing, and this isn't the first time that that's been said, and it almost certainly won't be the last. In Isolation, the alien is a constant threat, always looming around the corner, always seeking the player out, with next to no weaknesses and a number of moves that can finish the player off almost instantly. Even by itself, it's a terrifying thing, but then there's the PRIMAGEN from Turok 2, another alien, but this one with telepathic powers that can be potentially world-ending. Imagine an extraterrestrial beast with the combined abilities of the two. It's freaky to say the least. SHIMA SAKON, NIO, and MURAI, Ninja Gaiden. A boss combination brought to you by Team Ninja. Both SHIMA SAKON and MURAI also seem to complement each other. SAKON is a long-range specialist who uses spear attacks and is weak to attacks up close, while MURAI is a quick and agile close-range specialist. MURAI has an incredible amount of strength and can even throw his enemies across long distances, while SAKON, incredibly enough, can breathe lightning on his opponents, while also having some AoE attacks under his belt. If you were to come across a warrior in a game who had the combined abilities of both, there's no doubt in our minds that you'd be in for a tough battle. Storm King, Demon's Souls, and DIRGE, Shadow of the Colossus. Demon's Souls and Shadow of the Colossus, two games known for having some of the most excellent boss encounters you'll ever see. The Storm King from Demon's Souls is a fairly tough enemy, though to be fair, there are a few tricks that you can use to beat him without much hassle, with an aerial advantage and some pretty hard-hitting attacks. On the other hand, the 10th Colossus from Shadow of the Colossus functions almost entirely underground, coming up to the surface to chase the player down and deal an almost deadly blow every once in a while. However, a boss fight with the dogged determination of the Storm King and the deadly attacks of DIRGE, with the excellent design of both, would be a fight to remember. The Fear, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Marguerite, Resident Evil 7. Metal Gear Solid 3's Cobra unit was full of interesting characters with unique and ridiculous abilities, and perhaps among the most memorable of them all has to be the Fear. The Fear had the ability to camouflage himself almost to the point of being invisible, while, thanks to having double joints and lizard-like abilities, he could also crawl, jump, and run at superhuman speeds, as well as walk on water. In a way, Marguerite Baker from Resident Evil 7 had a lot of similar abilities, such as superhuman strength and speed, and the ability to crawl on walls and ceilings like spiders. But she also had the unique ability of summoning and controlling insects. If the two bosses were to join forces, they'd truly be a force to be reckoned with. Orphan of Kos, Bloodborne, The Old Hunters, and Gravelord NITO, Dark Souls. Gravelord NITO from Dark Souls has plenty of cool lore attached to him, but as a boss fight, it has to be said that it is challenging. NITO is a massive creature, but he is very fast, and his attacks can be quite deadly. And then there's the Orphan of Kos from Bloodborne, The Old Hunters. The Orphan's visual design, at least the first stage, is kinda similar to NITO, but as a boss encounter, it's much more challenging, with all manner of devastating attacks and a much more terrifying second form. A boss that has NITO's ability to deal massive damage and the Orphan's challenge would be a frightening thing indeed. Onslaught, Marvel vs. Capcom, Clash of the Superheroes, and Shao Kahn, Mortal Kombat. Onslaught and Shao Kahn are both well-known characters from very popular fighting franchises, and both are regarded as among the toughest characters to beat in their respective series. Onslaught is regarded as one of the toughest enemies of all time in all of Marvel vs. Capcom, while Mortal Kombat's Shao Kahn isn't a pushover either. The two of them joining forces, then, is obviously a terrifying notion. With Onslaught's bevy of devastating attacks, and his psychic and magnetic powers, and Shao Kahn's superhuman strength and extensive mastery over magical abilities, the two would be nearly unstoppable. LEVIATHAN, Monster Hunter Frontier, and Riftworm, Gears of War 2. They're sinking cities with a giant worm scene from Gears of War 2 has to be one of the greatest scenes in the entire franchise to date. The Riftworm never really appears as a traditional boss encounter, but the massive subterranean worm serves as an important set piece nonetheless. But there's another similar monster that's an even more formidable foe. If you're a Monster Hunter fan, you're probably familiar with LEVIATHAN, the largest monster in the Monster Hunter series. Not only can the LEVIATHAN burrow itself underground, it also has a ton of health, can deal massive amounts of damage, can breathe fire, and can make volcanoes erupt under your feet. Can you imagine a giant worm with the combined abilities of these two? It's the stuff of nightmares. Leviathan Resistance 2, and Kronos, God of War 3. Neither the Leviathan from Resistance 2 nor Kronos from God of War 3 are particularly tough as boss encounters. But they both have one thing in common. They're massive enemies, though Kronos is decidedly larger, of course. Defeating these two bosses isn't a particularly tough task in the two games in question, but what if the two of them decided to join forces and attack their enemy together? Facing one enemy that is as large as a mountain may not be a particularly difficult task. Well, you'd think it would be, but as it turns out it isn't in these games. But facing two at a time might just prove to be much more challenging. KEIJI Shibusawa, Yakuza 0, and Liquid Snake, Metal Gear Solid. The KEIJI Shibusawa and Liquid Snake boss fights from Yakuza 0 and Metal Gear Solid are quite unique, and quite similar to each other, in that neither of the two enemies possess any supernatural strengths or abilities. Rather, the fights against them boil down to a simple matter of good old-fashioned fisticuffs. Neither one of them is really that easy to beat, although Liquid Snake is decidedly more challenging with his vast arsenal of attacks and large amount of damage he deals almost every time, not to mention the time limit involved. Another boss fight that takes the best of both worlds and manages to make it as challenging as the Liquid Snake one, if not more so, would be an absolute treat indeed. Amnion, Silent Hill Homecoming, and Laura, The Evil Within. The Laura chase from The Evil Within has to be one of the hardest and most intense sequences we've seen in a horror game over the last decade or so. A lot of that is down to the fact that Laura herself is absolutely terrifying, and everything from her design to her ability to teleport to her immunity to gunfire makes her a tough boss to deal with. Amnion from Silent Hill Homecoming is pretty similar in nature, with a really similar visual design and the abilities to literally spew toxic bile and attack with its various mechanical appendages. Can you imagine a twisted monstrosity that looks like the two of these and can also do everything that they can both do? We're pretty glad that no such thing exists. Yawn, Resident Evil, and MIDGARDSORMR, Final Fantasy 15. Both Yawn and MIDGARDSORMR are huge, scary snakes from Resident Evil and Final Fantasy 15 respectively. and they're both pretty freaky in their own way. Yawn is a huge snake that was experimented upon and injected with a strain of viruses, turning it into a vicious, violent monstrosity that attacks and kills any humans that venture into the mansion that it's made its home in. MIDGARDSORMR, on the other hand, is also a huge snake and has a ridiculous amount of HP, a set of devastating attacks, and can also burrow its way underground, where it's immune to any damage. Both of them are quite challenging encounters, and we can't help but imagine what it would be like if we were to come up against both of them at the same time. Well, it'd probably be brief. Very brief. MAWLR, Killzone 3, and Deathbringer, Horizon Zero Dawn. There were so many times in Horizon Zero Dawn when the designs of the machines we encountered were surprisingly reminiscent of the Helghast machinery of the Killzone series. But the one machine that this applies to more than any other is the Deathbringer, which looks and feels a great deal like the mammoth MAWLR from Killzone 3. The Deathbringer is a fearsome enemy in and of itself, with a vast amount of health and a lot of extremely strong attacks, but you can imagine a Deathbringer the size of a MAWLR. MAWLRs are massive and have both anti-ground and anti-air attacks, with the ability to fight against entire battalions single-handedly, essentially what a group of Deathbringers can do. Who knows, maybe Guerrilla have something like this planned for a Horizon sequel. We never did get to see the Metal Devil in action after all. Adamantoise, Final Fantasy 15, and Hecaton, Bulletstorm. The Adamantoise was classified as a super boss in Final Fantasy 15, and for good reason. It was ridiculously huge. It had over 5 million HP, and as such it could take anywhere between an hour and 3 hours to beat this optional boss. That said, the Adamantoise wasn't really that hard. Sure, it took a long time to beat, but its attacks are easy to dodge and it doesn't do too much damage. And using the right strategies, right potions, and right equipment, at higher levels you can beat it pretty easily. And then there's the Hecaton from Bulletstorm, a massive, colossal subterranean monster that serves as the centerpiece of a set piece of the game. But can you imagine coming up against the two giants together at the same time? You'd be squashed like a bug within seconds.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.